Let's continue with those budget discussions, expectations. We chat now with the Black Business Council CEO, Kganki Matabane. Kganki, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks so much for your time. So what are you expecting from the Minister in the form of support for small to medium businesses? We know support has not been that extensive, so that so the budget can actually make any kind of difference. What are you hoping for to sort of ease things for these businesses?
Good afternoon, Rebecca, and the viewers. The expectations of the Black Business Council is in line with the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. We were participating at NetLec, so as part of the recovery plan, we've agreed that we need to be very, very intentional in terms of supporting small businesses, supporting businesses owned by women, business owned by young people, and businesses owned by people with disabilities. And we should do that using different instruments. One of the instruments is public procurement, which is basically state procurement from municipalities, national government, provincial, state-owned enterprises. And that is done through a legislation. And the legislation that we currently have is not supportive of black business. It has failed basically to empower black business for the past 26 to 27 years. So there's a process of discussing what is called the public procurement bill. And in the SONA, the president did mention that the minister will deal with that matter. And so we're expecting the minister to say something about expediting the process, because if the process is going to follow the normal process that we have, we don't think it's going to help. So it has to be expedited so that we get to the act as soon as possible. You'll recall in the SONA also that the president did mention that 40% of state procurement should be set aside for women. And that can only happen when there's a legislation that the current legislation does not talk about any set aside for any targeted group. So we cannot achieve that 40% with the current legislation. So we're expecting the minister to pronounce on the public procurement bill.
Kganki, how hopeful are you, just given everything you've mentioned and going sort of historically speaking, this is way before COVID, and we have to look at, what has happened. We have to look at the state of our economy, where government was struggling already before COVID hit to actually, put out decent economic growth. And, how do we expect, since things have gotten even worse, tenfold since that time, since a year ago, that many of these expectations will be realized, especially now where restrictions still exist? We haven't come out of it yet.
Yeah, the expectations are very, very high, and they are not unreasonable. Looking at the fact that yesterday State SA released the unemployment figures, and we were sitting at the highest percentage of unemployed people since 2008. The economy is not growing. If you take people who are not actually even looking for a job, we are sitting at almost 50% of people unemployed, which is unsustainable. And the young people makes the bulk of that. So if we don't come up with initiatives that are seeking to deal with those issues, we're threatening the very existence of democracy, because people may one day stand up and say, enough is enough with what we have. So expectations are very high. The minister should take a cue from the president, and the president has announced the economic recovery plan as a blueprint that will take the country from where it is to where it's supposed to be. You are very much right that the situation has been very, very, very challenging even before COVID, and then COVID has just made things very, very worse. And then we have seen, I think, more than 2 million people lost their jobs, and that is a very, very unsustainable situation that we cannot live with.
And I suppose we have to also look at, expectations of ordinary South Africans, of the general workforce out there, Kganki, when we consider just what's been poured into our SOEs, and I'm sure that he's going to come in for a lot of criticism, or he has already, and depending on what he says this afternoon as well, and how much more concessions he actually makes for them, that people are going to say, well, you've already taken our money, you've already given it to these entities to save them, because they were, all our money went because of corruption. What do you think, or what would you like him to say? What are you expecting to hear from him in terms of what his expectations are of ordinary South Africans, ordinary workers, and what he expects of them to actually shell out, especially over our anger and our frustrations over corruption and what we've done to save our ailing SOEs?
The normal person on the street is struggling, suffering. Some of them are unemployed, some of them are employed, but they're only getting half the salary because the economy is not fully functional. For example, if you take people who are in the liquor industry, they are not earning anything on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which is unfair. I think that needs to be corruption is very, very important. It has to be dealt with, and it must be seen to be dealt with. It's one thing to talk about dealing with corruption, but something completely different from actually being seen to be dealing with corruption. So it's important that as a government as a whole, we and even private sector, we are seen to be dealing with corruption. People who are corrupt are dealt with swiftly and quickly, so that we send the right message to those who are even contemplating getting involved in corruption. When it comes to the SOC, I think it's important that to realize that we've got around 700 and something SOCs, and the question that all of us must ask ourselves is, do we really need some of them? Some of them that are actually doing what is called public goods, like ESCOM and others, those we need, because if you take them to the private sector hands, the man on the street or the woman on the street won't be able to afford the electricity. So those ones that are providing essential services like water, electricity, those have to be kept by the state. But we have to look at those that are not necessarily providing public goods, and those that the state only holds a minority stake, and see, do we really need to have them? Because in any case, we're not controlling them. So we're as much as any other minority shareholder. So what needs to be done is an agent exercise that then determines which ones are serving the public at large, and which ones are not necessarily serving the public, and then do away with those ones. And then support the ones that are serving the public, because you also need to balance between the need for profit and the need to serve our communities.
Kganki, let's talk a little bit about the help or the little bit of a lifeline that government has thrown out to some people over this time. And do you think that, how important to you is it that the minister make reference to the extension of that 350 Rand special grant? And we know that money coming in very handy. It means little to many others, but for most people, especially in the township economy, they use this for their micro businesses. They use it to make ends meet on some level. What are you wanting to hear from him about that?
Yeah, it's important that that 350 is sustained. The president has already made an undertaking that it be extended to end of March. But what we're looking for is the UIF support for companies and individuals who, even as we speak, have not necessarily opened their business fully. When we went to level 3 in December, there are some of the businesses and individuals who were negatively affected. So those ones need to continue to benefit from the UIF benefits. There's also something that was introduced during the 500 billion relief fund, which is called a loan scheme. They put aside 200 billion for the loan scheme, which is like 40% of the 500 billion. And it does not work so far. And the intention for that was to support businesses in general through the banks. And that has not worked. And we've engaged the National Treasury, we've engaged the Reserve Bank, we've engaged the banks to say, we need to relook at the loan guarantee scheme because it's not working. If it's not working, it means it's not meeting the needs of the people that it was targeted to. it was targeted for. And if it's not working, then we have to look at it, because I think out of the 200 billion, only around 8 or so billion was actually used. So the balance is not necessarily serving the needs of businesses. So we need to re-look at that and introduce other players. We've proposed, for example, the introduction of the non-banking lenders, because they've got a different risk appetite compared to the normal banks. And if we include them, that may help with the uptake, because the need for funding and then for financial support for small businesses is there. We see it every day. People are closing the companies because they don't necessarily have anything to support them.
Yeah.
So we were expecting the minister to say something about the 200 billion loan guarantee scheme as well.
All right. Well, as we know, business has changed. The whole world has been turned on its head over the past year. Let's see how South Africans are expected to adapt and how far the finance minister, and of course he doesn't do this alone, government is willing to help us adapt and make ends meet and make it sort of work for us and create those jobs. We need to create jobs.